Ko Richard Templar toku ingoa, ko kai whakahaere te aorangaho Engineering New Zealand. Welcome, I'm Richard Templar. I'm the Chief Executive of Engineering New Zealand, and welcome to our election conversation series. Joining me is the Honourable Chris Bishop.
Hi.
From the National Party, and we're going to have a conversation about the engineering profession and what National can do for it. To start with, we'd like your elevator pitch to the profession.
Well, thank you for having me. I think National's the party of infrastructure and therefore I think the party of engineers, and I've got the privilege of holding that very important portfolio. And one of the things we've tried to do over the last 3 years is fix the basics of the system. We've set up that National Infrastructure Plan, a 30-year roadmap for New Zealand's future, and bipartisan agreement across the Parliament on that, not on every single thing, but the broad direction of travel, which is really good. We've invested billions into roads and rail, hospitals, schools, for example, and we've got a bright pipeline coming into the future. And one of the things we want to do in the future is strengthen up the pipeline and the data sharing requirements around that. So what you can expect from us going forward in the next 3 years is building on the work of the National Infrastructure Plan, looking at more private capital, looking at fixing the basics of our infrastructure system, and making sure that we redress that deficit. We build on long-term investment plans for our Crown agencies, asset management plans, all the things that we've started, we've now got to implement over the next 3 years and beyond and build New Zealand's future.
That's fantastic. You've talked about the National Infrastructure Plan, and the cross-party support for that is really remarkable. What do you think is the most important recommendation in the...
Well, they're all important, and we've endorsed all of them, the 16 recommendations and the 10 priorities for the future. A few that I think are really important is bolstering the pipeline. I get a lot of commentary from people about, we need a bipartisan committed pipeline, and there's some recommendations that we've agreed to there around making sure that every government agency is participating, and we're looking at maybe extending that to everyone in the infrastructure sector, both private, public, local government as well, so that we've got a very clear, visible pipeline, which I think will help everybody. Those long-term investment plans that we've started are important as well. So, the chopping and changing, the stopping and starting of projects, that will be minimised if we have that long-term commitment to, a corrections long-term plan, a police long-term plan, justice, education, health, for example. So a lot of progress made over the last 2 years. The Infrastructure Commission is now going to be in charge of assurance over those projects. So we're at the start of a journey, long way to go. Likewise with asset management plans for Crown agencies as well. So making sure we're continuing to invest in looking after what we've got. All of that will provide a good steady pipeline of work for engineers, but also more broadly everyone involved in infrastructure as well. So those will probably be the couple of things, but they're all important, obviously.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. One of the challenges for infrastructure in New Zealand has been weather events and natural hazards. What will the National Party do to work on our resilience to both weather events and hazards?
So we've made quite a lot of progress in the last 2 years. We've obviously got this new National Adaptation Framework, and we've passed a National Policy Statement on natural hazards. So councils are now required to take natural hazards into account when it comes to planning. That will feed into the new spatial planning under the new planning regime that I'm developing wearing my other hat, RMA reform hat. So looking at spatial planning and working out the areas where you should build and also the areas where you can't build, and marking those areas off and better planning for the future. So all of those things are important. And then there's the issue to do with flood maps, and we are in the process of developing a national flood map. Initial tranche is pulling together all the data that the councils and insurers already have. Tranche 2, next term, if we get a second one, I hope we will, is to get much more rich granular data, pulling that together into a national data set, again feeding into spatial planning so that councils and in fact everybody in the system can make better decisions around where and what we build, and how to cope with severe weather events. Also wearing my transport hat on, we're putting a lot more money into resilience projects, for example. Just in the last budget announced a lot of money for things like the Awakino Gorge, Waireka Gorge, down south, State Highway 25 and the Coromandel and things as well. So we're going to continue to need to do that, but we also need to plan better. And so it's a multi-pronged approach.
One of the areas people have talked about a need for planning is in the energy sector, and in particular, how do we ensure both more energy generation and more resilient energy grid and delivery system?
Well, the good news is there's a big bow wave of renewable energy investment coming, and even more to come with Fast Track. So a lot of projects being consented through Fast Track, wind farms, solar. New Zealand consented its first hydro dam in like 30 years just the other day, which is the small scale to be fair, but the Waitāha hydro on the west coast, very important for the west coast, helps improve their energy resilience and security. So that's one part of it. If you just step back a bit, we've got this enormous opportunity in New Zealand with abundant renewable energy. The electrification of the economy can be a big part of New Zealand's success in the 2030s and beyond. We do need that dry year risk cover. It's a bit controversial, but we're obviously developing the LNG terminal. That is about actually crowding in the renewables. People say, oh, you're just going back to fossil fuels, but actually having the security of a dry year risk through an LNG facility actually means that people are more likely to make the big renewables investments, in the sort of winter peaks and things like that. So that is a really important part of it. Simeon's leading a whole bunch of work around changing the details and rules of the way the electricity market works, and he'll continue to do with that. And I just see Transpower the other day got permission approval for new cable across the Cook Strait, HVDC. I think it's over $1 billion, 1.04 billion rings a bell, might be a bit more than that. So that's great progress, and that they'll get on with that in the next few years.
I think that's a really important project, both in terms of resilience and supply. So that's great to see. You talked about electrification. Any thoughts on government's role in incentivising or driving that?
Yeah, there are mixed views out there around this. The reality is things like solar, things like wind, things like geothermal, they are in terms of the long run marginal cost curve, they're the least cost, right? And so the way the electricity market works is it's incentivised to deliver the lowest cost into the system. And so, that is what is happening. That's why there's a big bow wave of renewables coming. The electricity sector, most independent observers would say to you, in comparison to many other infrastructure sectors in New Zealand, we're pretty well off in energy. It's not perfect. We've spent a long time building an electricity market, and it's not perfect. No sector is, obviously, but if you compare it to, say, water, for example, which is not in great shape, electricity, by comparison, looks much better.
Absolutely. Another sector of real interest to engineers is manufacturing. We need to have a more productive manufacturing sector, and we need a larger manufacturing sector. What will the National Party deliver in that space?
Well, we've done investment boost, and that's a massive investment in manufacturing and, in fact, the whole of the productive economy. Essentially a form of accelerated depreciation. That's gone down really well. It's making some, capex projects more economic, nearly immediately, or certainly bringing forward some of that investment. And some of the economic analysis I've seen from the Treasury and IRD and others is that will have a material impact on our growth rates and on businesses' desire and willingness to invest from the capital side of things, all of which drives productivity, growth and higher wages. So it does have a material effect, and the modelling shows this on wages and on employment and on growth. So we're going to keep that. There is a bit of talk out there, without being too political about it, there is a bit of talk that others may cancel it. I would plead with people to not do that, because it's a sizable investment. It's a multi-billion-dollar investment in the productive side of the economy's future, engineering, but manufacturing as well. We've got to keep signing free trade deals. We're really proud of that India deal. We've got to implement it now, and get the legislation through the Parliament, and then get New Zealand exporters and manufacturers up to India and others to take advantage of that. We've got the Gulf Cooperation Council deal, we've got the UAE deal, the EU deal is going really well. China's obviously still there. So selling on the world stage, big part of that, and you can expect a continued focus on that from national and government.
Just briefly, in terms of the India deal, where do you see the biggest opportunities for New Zealand outside of the primary sector?
Well, I think in the short term, the biggest opportunities are likely to be in primary. If you think about kiwi fruit, think about wine, think about some of the areas which are opened up for export. over time, though, so that's the sort of immediate stuff. Over time, though, you're going to see a much closer connection between a country of 1.4 billion people and little old New Zealand at the bottom of the world. And so the ability for New Zealand technology companies to access those waitlist services exports into India, some of the more advanced manufacturing facilities that we have, the ability to get access to it. I mean, some of these free trade deals are not just about market access in the sense of tariffs and subsidies and the removal of non-tariff barriers and things like that. They're actually about visibility and about profile. And if we're re-elected, I'm sure I'm right in saying there'll be trade missions, and because it's fine to sign a trade deal, but it's what you do with it that counts. And we signed the China trade deal in 2008. But then it took, many years of work to lift New Zealand's profile up in China, from the Prime Minister down, both Helen Clark, John Key and beyond. And so we want to do the same with India, and, those relationships will be really important.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thanks
Minister.
for your hard work as well.
Oh, thank you. If you've enjoyed the conversation, please make sure you tune in on August the 6th for our great infrastructure debate. And thank you very much to Minister Bishop for the kind words about the engineering profession. Thank you very much.